Since March 5, 2011, Syria has been engulfed in a bloody civil war between the Assad regime and the Free Syrian Army. In 2013, ISIS also began to capture land in Syria, creating more conflict in the country. Since the start of the war, the UN estimates the death toll to be around 220,000 casualties, including over 11,000 children. Over 3 million people have fled to neighboring countries, and 6.5 million people are internally displaced.
You know, on one hand, the governor says that safety is paramount, that he wants to make sure that no terrorists would get through the process and attack Arkansans. On the other side, you have Syrian refugees saying that they don't pose a threat, that they're fleeing from war, and that they need a place to go. So I don't have an opinion.
In light of the declaration of war from ISIS, in light of the horrific terrorist attack, in light of the admissions from the director of the FBI, who I might note President Obama appointed, Director Comey said the administration cannot vet these refugees to determine whether or not they are ISIS terrorists. Indeed, he said, since they don't have the data on which of the Syrian refugees are involved with ISIS terrorism.
If I knew the vetting process, if there's so much rumor and there's so much, is it families? Is it mostly, is it mostly male? I don't know. It's, you're so far ahead in the news cycle right now to know what's true and what's not true. If 75% of the refugees were truly male, I think that's a problem. That's not families. If most of them are families, if it is widows and orphans, as the president has said, that's a different story. Somewhat, I heard someone say, why should we be letting 40-year-old or 25-year-old refugees in here while we're sending our young men there to fight? I think that you cannot ignore folks, especially. You look at the Paris attacks on Friday the 13th. You look at the Russian bomber being blown out of the air. And then, of course, you had 9/11 before all of this. So people being concerned about themselves and their families, you've got to respect that.
Just to not fall down to the terrorist game and to fulfill our moral obligation toward this. We are, at the end, this country is built on immigrants, and we have to help these people because they are in need and they are in desperate needs to be helped there. And I hope that our presidential candidates, they will do the correct thing at the end of that. To come to the United States, you have to fly. This is the only way for a refugee to come here. And to fly here, you have to be registered in the United Nations, and then you have to be investigated by the United Nations. After you're finished by the United Nations, here is what's happening. The Department of State investigates. Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, CIA, all these departments together come and investigate any refugees who wants to come to the United States. So if there's any gap in anyone's story, he's not going to be admitted to the United States. So for the refugees, it is not that difficult to know who really in need to help here, or who want to do harm. And it will be a stupidest idea for a terrorist to come through the United Nations and register himself and wait for a few years to be admitted to the United States and to become a refugee. Some of these refugees, as are widows, women, children, university students, people who has nothing to do with this war. They just want to find a safe place where they can raise their kids in peace. So these people actually being settled in the neighboring countries, in Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan. But unfortunately, these countries, they are not signed Geneva agreements regarding refugees, so there's no settlement. So the refugees have to stay in the camps until the war ends. And as we all know, the war is started now. It's now entered the 5th year. And it's hard for a family to stay in a tent and keep waiting for something maybe it will take decades.
Okay, لحظة بس. For the main paths, it's clean now. We clean it up. But for the rest of the border, of course, there is still mines. But now we focus on the refugees path. So